Dave Dombrowski and the Philadelphia Phillies have plenty of questions to answer this offseason, and right at the top of the list is what to do with Kyle Schwarber. The Phillies slugger is entering the final year of his 4-year contract that he initially signed and is set to be a free agent this offseason, with the feeling that if an extension would have taken its place, it would have happened already, being a concern at the top of the list. I do want to talk about the future outlook for Kyle Schwarber and the concerning report that we did get regarding his status. Now, before I dive fully into it today, do want to remind you guys, as always, to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. At this point in time, just 27% of you guys watching these videos have subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. We've got plenty more to get into this season. Before we even have to get into the fearful offseason talks, there will be some real baseball to break down and some better vibes to get into. But I do want to talk about a looming story, something that I think is very important to this Phillies team, and that being the future of Kyle Schwarber. Now, to dive into the report that we did get from John Kincaid of the Kincaid and South Tuna show on 97.5, we get, quote, "I believe they are letting Schwarber go to free agency. I do not expect that Schwarber is going to be signed before the end of the year. From what I was told, they gave an offer. The offer was not embarrassing, but it was, yeah, that's not going to get it done." So obviously we kind of know some of this context at this point, but my biggest fear is if he gets to free agency, a team like the Dodgers or a team like the Mets is going to swoop in and give him a blank check. That is who Kyle Schwarber has sort of earned to be from a baseball player perspective. And to highlight how effective that he has been this season, a legitimate case that this has been the best year of his career. He's already up to 22 home runs, 52 RBIs, a 379 on-base percentage, 544 slugging percentage there, has walked 51 times across his 259 at-bats, has 64 hits, also stolen 5 bases this year, which is kind of crazy, struck out 82 times. And to kind of compare this to the Phillies roster as a whole, that he's got more than double the most home runs of the next guy on the team. Now, this is obviously a bit of a flaw and a hole in this Phillies team overall, that they have not hit for enough power this year, but Kyle Schwarber, the clear solution to this, and a guy who has held up his end of the bargain in that category here. Now, I bring all this in to say, I understand that there are limitations that Kyle Schwarber brings, and by that I primarily mean defensively, that he's only played left field for 5 total games this season. He is primarily a DH, and that's been sort of a problem from a roster construction standpoint. I do wonder if, from the Phillies' perspective, if they're beginning to project that long-term, the best way to keep Bryce Harper healthy could be to keep him in a DH role, and that is sort of what's chasing Kyle Schwarber out of it. But I kind of feel Bryce Harper is an excellent first baseman. He's figured out the position at a very rapid rate. And while I get, obviously, injuries are the most important, I mean, he's on the injured list again with that wrist issue, and that's the same thing that bothered him last year. The doctors obviously have a clear feel for this. But if you can find any way to keep Kyle Schwarber on this Phillies team, I think you need to find a way to make that happen. This dude is a winner, and they have not had enough of that winning identity. It is not a coincidence that when he first signed that contract to come to Philadelphia, that is when things truly began to turn around. And to dive into what exactly that contract was here, that it was a 4-year, $79 million deal, initially signed before the 2022 season here. Once again, not coincidental in when they began to really start winning some ball games and making some postseason noise here. I think everyone, Kyle Schwarber himself, is probably a bit surprised by just how significant his level of importance to this team is. I think outside of Zack Wheeler, you can make a pretty legitimate case that he's been their best player this season and really the past couple years. Sure, Bryce Harper right in that same mix, no doubt about it, but there is something about Kyle Schwarber just being a leader, carrying this team, being the guy that is has that winning DNA in a way that I think was very necessary, and I don't want that to walk out of the organization by any means. I do think it is two-sided here that Kyle Schwarber wanted to be back in Philadelphia and that the Phillies did want to re-sign him this past offseason, but it didn't happen. And why is that? It can't be the money conversation. As we know, John Middleton is willing to spend just about whatever is possible. Frankly, I think Dave Dombrowski probably deserves a little bit more heat for not capitalizing on that massive advantage he has compared to other general managers around the MLB. And I understand there's luxury tax penalties. I understand it is not as clean as just you can spend however much you want. But John Middleton's going to give you the assets to build a World Series contender if you can pick the right strings, find the right players, and that's sort of where he has fallen up short. It is maddening to me in this conversation that it feels like the Phillies are an organization digging through the bargain bin, trying for Jordan Romano in a resurgent year, signing Max Kepler with a shot in the dark that he can improve, and shout out to Kepler, who's been very good in recent games, but this isn't a team swinging for the fences and getting these premier players. They've had opportunities, and Trey Turner kind of the number one guy that will pop to mind, but I also sort of wonder if when this eventual era of Phillies baseball ultimately concludes, if we look at the Trey Turner signing as where the door really kind of shut, and to give credit to Trey, I think he's pretty comfortably in the best season of his Phillies career. He's smacking the baseball right now, but he isn't driving for power. The defensive concerns are still there, and he's paid to be a co-star to Bryce Harper in the way that he's just not. He's a good baseball player, a guy that plenty of teams would love to have on their roster here. Not a guy that I'm embarrassed to have representing the Phillies by any means, and he's grown on me to an extent, but I still wonder, when looking at that $300 million deal, are you getting exactly what you were paying for there? And I still kind of feel that the answer is no. But Kyle Schwarber is not a guy that we can feel that way about. And as far as a respect thing, we also kind of see how things have fallen apart without this roster being fully together. That Kyle Schwarber has 3 intentional walks in these 7 games since Bryce Harper went on the injured list. He had just 2 intentional walks in his first 64 games. Teams have clearly decided they're going to try to make someone else on the Phillies, in that Phillies lineup, pay him. And also, this comes on the heels of course, our first major blockbuster deal in the major leagues this season, with Rafael Devers being sent to the San Francisco Giants here, a former teammate of Kyle Schwarber. And it's maddening to me, as we continue to have these kind of conversations, that really getting nothing in return from Red Sox perspective. Doing this at a time where, for starters, they had momentum and looked like they were putting it together. A guy who there's obviously been some internal rifts between him and the franchise overall. But you can't tell me that a team like the Phillies, who obviously would have had to battle some really interesting, lineup arrangements or who's playing what position there, couldn't have beaten an offer like this. Like, you're telling me a guy like Alec Boehm doesn't move the needle more than Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison and this package that the Red Sox ultimately accepted here? And for the prospect conversation, it feels pretty maddening to me. We're also in the central ground of these guys aren't getting true opportunities, although shout out Otto Kemp, who's making the most of his chance. But the Justin Crawfords, it's clearly identified within the organization that they don't believe he's ready. Aiden Miller isn't ready yet. Andrew Painter being handled with kid gloves. And I'm not saying we should be rushing to trade these guys, but you got to utilize prospects one way or another. Either have a clear pathway and plan, and maybe they do in the long haul. Maybe I'm second guessing too much. Or cash them in and get players that you know exactly what they're going to be at the major league level. I understand wanting to keep a bright future from a prospect perspective, but I personally feel much more confident in knowing who a guy's going to be when we have hundreds of MLB at-bats of a sample size, rather than a dude that has not even made his debut yet. So for a guy like Rafael Devers, I'm not saying he was the missing piece on this Phillies team, but that did not feel like a lot to go get him. And I do kind of think for a team that needed a bit of a spark, would have been a really interesting move from the Phillies' perspective, especially if there is the likely chance that Schwarber does walk this offseason. So I bring all this up to say that I hope this ends up being a non-story. I hope this is nothing more than some posturing from Schwarber's agency, and he is well represented, a guy that deserves to be paid a pretty penny, that he is playing like one of the best hitters, best players in Major League Baseball, and wants to be properly compensated as a result of this. But it is pretty maddening that we've even got to this point, that Kyle Schwarber should have been locked up on a long-term extension plenty of time ago, and that did not come together. But ultimately, they can only fix the problem now. They can't harp on those mistakes, and they still have a chance to get to the negotiation table. I think the most likely outcome from here is that Kyle Schwarber sets his market value, reaches free agency, and the Phillies have a chance to either match that or he goes and signs with somebody else. I do hope that is not the case and that he does end up retiring his career in red pinstripes there, but ultimately a lot more questions and a lot more of an open-ended conversation than frankly should be the case, or that I wish was the case right now. But let me know what you guys think about this Kyle Schwarber conversation overall. What do you think the likelihood, 1 to 10, that he does leave Philadelphia is? Do you want to hear from you guys in the comments on that? And one more time, do want to remind you guys, as always, to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. Once again, 73% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. We got plenty more to get into this year. We are in the real deal stretch of the season at this point. The All-Star break right there on the horizon, so a lot more baseball to get into, but boy, things are flying by. But once again, do drop those thoughts on Kyle Schwarber below. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video here. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.